Hello and welcome back, or I guess welcome to the first Red League show for season 8, the first actual show. We had our preview show, but now the season has officially started and we're 3 weeks in. And today, joining me to talk about those 3 weeks and kind of taking a small look forward into the next few is Carpographer. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Calamity. How are you?
I'm doing good as well. Looking forward to the season, even though we've already kind of started a bit. But let's
Mhm.
start off then with taking a look at Reddit League next. Before we get into that, actually, for those who may have not watched show 0, the first 3 weeks were Malta, Israel, and Dams of the World. For our players, I don't think we have anyone from Malta or Israel in the competition, so no home field advantages there, but maybe some dams were in countries that people, are from. But we'll get to that. And yeah,
Mhm.
Reddit League next. Here we have the table, and yeah, it seems surprisingly a bit closer, I think, overall than it was last season. I don't know if it's just because it's only been 3 weeks and one was a world map and one was Malta, but the standings are
Mhm.
still very, very close.
Yeah, for sure. We see what's it like? The top 10 are still separated by about 10,000, which with any of the matches, with any of the weeks coming up, people could definitely swap spots there. Uh, but I think out of those, you still have Turila Soundbite and K-Champ at the top, uh, about 2,000 points ahead of next person in the sequences, and yeah, they've just been very consistent these first 3 weeks, and well, we'll have to see whether they keep up that consistency. But yeah.
Yeah, exactly. They have a little bit of a gap. Yeah, from fourth to 13th, basically, it's only 5,000 points. So a lot in the midfield that can swap around with any round, basically. Just one 5K compared to a total miss can just swap it all, especially in some of the smaller countries that are coming up. Especially, I'm looking at Lesotho here for week 5, where I think this could swap around a whole lot depending on who puts in how much effort. Still a very French heavy division. There are 8
Mhm.
Frenchmen and French women, I guess. Is that a word? Do you say that? Can you say that? I
uh,
don't know.
I'm
Uh,
not sure.
yeah, I've never heard of it. I just thought, yeah, well, whatever. Maybe someone knows
Mhm.
better than us. Um, but yeah, again, very, very close, and I'm looking forward to see how that evolves. I think until like this season, Reddit League Next has always kind of had like one, two, three people running away with it, creating big
Mhm.
gaps at the front. And this looks like it could be the first time where we actually have a pretty interesting battle for most of the positions. And it might keep interesting until the last few weeks. Looking,
Yeah.
oh,
Yeah.
go on.
No, that's it. I was just
Okay.
agreeing with
Okay, good. As you should.
you.
All right. Then looking into the regular divisions, we start as always with Division 5B, and we'll start with your picks for the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, so first of Bananoki and Blitva, I believe that was that the only 25K from the division? Uh I need to go back and check.
No. There were
No,
plenty
okay.
plenty of 25Ks.
Okay, there were plenty then this, yeah, okay, this was like one of the few that wasn't, and in fact yeah, this was the closest one. Now that I'm looking at it. So yeah, a little unfortunate for Blitva there. Um in the minority of people who didn't 25K Malta, and um, yeah, despite still putting up a 24K, uh, which is normally a pretty good score, but yeah, didn't work out for them this time, and Bananoki will profit off that with 4 points, which at least gives them a leg up over all of the other 25K draws in the division. Um, so they get a bonus point off of that. I'm sure they'll be very happy with it. And then for Israel, we have Settlin pulling off another 25K in what was probably not my favorite map of the season. Uh, and Israel is a pretty hard country, so yeah, props to them for getting a 25k. And yeah, okay, in this case, it is the only 25k of the division, so massive props there. And then finally, Dams of the World, Ice Pelican picking off a win from against Galette, and yeah, this was somehow the second closest game in the division. 2,000, actually almost 3,000 points off. But yeah, Pelican putting together one of the better games in the division and picks up a very well-earned win right there.
Yeah, all right. And moving over to my picks, I went, as we said, lots of 25Ks in that first week. The Malta, you know, map providing generally fairly easy seeds, but the Division 5 seed apparently, with 4 minutes 20, plenty of time for the people to get 25Ks. I picked one of these perfect draws. There were two more with Cephalin against Hedigmi and Damir against Clemens. I picked the one between Kanta and Galette because of the bonus point situation where obviously with 8 people getting a 25k, only 6 of them actually do get a bonus point, and therefore it came down to time. And Kanta was the lucky 6th place with 14 minutes 26. Just about managed to stay within the top half in terms of his time. Galette, unfortunately, 16 minutes 47, just outside of it, and therefore only taking home 2 points, which always is a bit annoying when you get a 25k, but that is just the way it is. Still a great score from him. A perfect score on his debut is always something to remember. For week 2, I picked Clemens against Bananoki. The by far actually the lowest scoring win out of anyone in that week. As you said, Cephalin with his 25k. But there were quite a few more 24Ks in there from Kanta, Portre, and Ice Pelican. But Bananoki, 21,300 points, enough for the win there. Luckily for him, wouldn't have been enough for a bonus point, for example, if he hadn't won his game. Clemens, a bit unlucky there. 20,000 points, still definitely a good score in Israel. As you said, not one of the easier countries, especially if you're just playing it as a country map. No points for his effort, but yeah, I still think he can't be too disappointed with his score. And for Dams of the World, we have another fairly close game. You picked the second closest. I picked the closest game of the week for Division 5B, with Upfloxseed picking up a 22,150 point score over Hidikmi's 20.5k on a very rough world map seed, which I think had 2 locations in Russia and was just overall very difficult to play. And people in Division 5 still put up some decent scores considering the difficulty of the seed. And in this one, Upfloxseed came out just on top. Erigmi still, I think, probably 6th best score. Yes, did get a bonus point with his score. Poltre, just, I think it's 66 points lower, did not get a bonus point. So barely ended up with a bonus point there. But yeah, that's all it takes sometimes. So looking over at the table, this is what it looks like after 3 weeks. What do you think about that? Any surprises that you can see? Anything unexpected?
I mean, the table does feel very close, even at the bottom, like between Damir, who's like coming close to the promotion spots, and Galette all the way at the bottom. It's still 4 points, so 25k can pull anyone into the fray again. But we do see Cephalin and Kantar. It's still very early in the season, but they do have 2-point gap at least to the people behind. So the 2 polls are really going to be putting up hell of a battle this season.
Yeah, Cephalin He's been around for a while in Division 5. I don't
Mhm.
know for sure right now if he's joined in season 5 or season 6. Um, he has been in season 5. So let me just quickly check if he's been in season 4. But he's been here for a while, and he's always kind of been around those sort of mid-table, upper mid-table positions in Division 5, but it just has never been quite enough to get the promotion. This season so far is looking very good, and it's looking like it's got the potential for him to finally make it happen. Total score not quite the highest. I think his Dams of the World score wasn't quite as good as the rest of them.
Yeah.
Yeah, he had an 18k against Antoine Peña, who
Yeah.
didn't play, so got a bit lucky there for those 3 points. But still, sometimes you need a little bit of luck as well. And yeah,
Hmm.
mentioned Kantar as well, a second pole in this division, looking good for him so far as well. Yeah, a bit further down, Galette and Clemens, unfortunately, no wins so far, even if they both have achieved the perfect score already. So at least they've got that going for them. And yeah, as you said, the table is still very close. I mean, from 12th to 9th, it's just 1 point separating the direct relegation spots and the spot in which you're completely safe from relegation. So everyone's still in a decent position. Obviously, if you're in 11th, 12th, maybe you're not exactly thinking about promotion anymore, but there's nothing to worry about yet, and the season is still pretty long.
Indeed.
Okay, then we'll move forward to our picks for the future for weeks 4 to 6. Let me quickly tell you, week 4 will have us visit Chile before we go into Lesotho. And week 6, after a 2 week break over the holidays, will have us visit the Philippines. So, some very interesting, rather difficult countries in there as well. And Carp, you can start us off with your picks for those weeks for Division 5B.
So for week 4, I went with Blitzer versus Galette, given that it's one of the bottom table matches, and like I said, any 25k is gonna pull them right out all the way, like up close to the promotion spots, and with Chile that week, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Chile, which is a fairly easy country to 5k, I think.
Yep.
At least in my opinion, with road numbers and everything. So yeah, 25k is definitely in the cards, and yeah, I think they have a really good shot at getting out of those relegation spots, whichever one of them it might be. Um, as for week 5, Panther versus Pelican. Um, this one is kind of on the other side. It's Pelican's shot at getting a ticket into the promotion spots. Like I said, the table is pretty close. It's only a 3 point gap. So if Pelican picks up a win or a 25k even, then yeah, uh, it gives them a good shot at getting past Kantar. Obviously, week 4 also plays into that, but yeah, that's the thing with looking to the future. You can guess whatever you want. And then Hidekme versus Bananoki was my last pick. Uh, this one of those middle table matchups. Again, a similar kind of thing. Um, whoever comes out on top is gonna pick up a pretty good advantage against um, the other. Especially, well, at the moment they're on equal points, so they get that leg up on them. Yeah, I and that's gonna be for Philippines as well, which uh, unless you know your provinces or something, that could definitely be
Mm-hmm.
um an interesting placement. To be honest, I forecast a couple of close ties that aren't 25Ks there. Uh,
It
just
could
from
be.
people picking the wrong island, but I think a lot of the matchups are going to be interesting there.
Yeah, yeah. Philippines is definitely also something I'm looking forward to. Not to play, no, God no, but to look at the results afterwards. Yeah, I think if I had to guess, I'd say probably about 40% of the players know the provinces. Another 40 have at least looked at them before and maybe tried to learn them one time or so.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm assuming about 20% probably, maybe know the ones named after something like an island or have heard of one or two, but may not know some of the more obscure ones. And yeah, that could definitely provide a bit of a challenge for them and make the difference in a lot of seeds, because you do get the information for which province you're in quite a lot in the Philippines, but you rarely ever get much beyond that. So if you don't know the province, you're probably gonna have a pretty rough time to find wherever you are. But yeah,
Mm-hmm.
for my picks for those weeks, in week 4, I went with Sevelin and Damir. Interesting matchup, obviously, because we're still so early on in the season. We can't look at the table too much and talk about, oh, that's like a promotion matchup or something like that. Because, as I said, everything can still happen. But, both of them in a good position so far. Both of them a lot of experience in Red League, as we pointed out before. It's Sevelin's 4th season. I think it's Damia's 3rd. So both of them know the deal, and could definitely be a pretty crucial matchup as well. If Damia wins that, then it all comes even closer together again. Whereas if Sevlin can pull out a win here, he might be able to pull a bit of a gap on his competitors. In week 5, I think the most interesting match to watch out for is potentially the French derby between Antoine Pignard and Eric Me, who are right next to each other in the table in 7th and 8th. Antoine not playing the last week. We got to look if that was just something he forgot to do, or if, I don't know, he just wants to stop. He's not told me anything. I don't know anything. We'll just, for now, I'll assume he just plays the next weeks as normal. In which case, that, yeah, right next to each other on the table, obviously going to be a pretty interesting matchup. I think Upfluxy Damir is also another one in that week that could be pretty decisive looking forward. I think Upfluxy so far has had a bit of a rough start. I think he's better than the 9th position on the table shows. So I
Mm-hmm.
also think, as far as I know, he's quite good with stuff like I'd expect him to know, for example, Philippine provinces or something like that. Won't help him in Lesotho, of course, but just generally speaking, I think he has the potential to be higher up in the table. And then for week 6, I think we have quite a few even matchups throughout. And let me go with it's a hard one, actually. I think I'm gonna mention Ice Pelican against Cephalin. Just again, higher up in the division. Interesting matchup for promotion potentially. I mean, if Ice Pelican loses his next 2 games, he might be in a position where that's not really any of his concern anymore. But they're very close together in total score as well. If you look at them, 68 456 for Cephalin, 68 391 for Ice Pelican. So very, very similar seasons so far. Just Ice Pelican a bit more unlucky, I presume, in Dams of the World. Was it that? No, it was Malta, actually, where he had a rough time. One of the only people who dropped points there with 20.5k, the worst score of the division. So has
Yeah.
been on a bit of a recovery since that and won his last 2 games. So we'll see if he can keep that up and push himself into those, at least into the promotion fight going forward.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, then let's move on to Division 5A and their results from the first 3 weeks. So take us away with your picks.
So yeah, I went with Labandra versus La Ish.
Yeah,
I still
Lajesh.
have not learned that shit. Okay, yeah, there you go. But that was one of the two 25k draws in the division, and well, the only one where both of them walked away with 3 points. The other draws in the division were actually, now that I look at it, a little more interesting. But props to both of them here for pulling off the 25Ks, and I suppose a little unlucky that they had to be matched up against each other. But they have it. Rajesh with is that no? That's the second fastest
Yes.
25K of the division.
Third,
8
actually.
minutes and 13.
Third.
Third?
Yep.
Oh, I missed the 6 minute 40. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then Levan Greb was probably he was the last one to pick up a bonus point with 13 minutes 46. So a little lucky for Levan Greb there, but he does walk away with a bonus point, and I'm sure he'll be very happy with that. In Israel, I picked another one of the 25K draws, and this time the only one in the division between Geoclem and Zorkta. And they were 2 out of only 3 people to pull off 25Ks. There, 4 if you include Settlin from 5B. But yeah, definitely a sort of unlucky matchup for them again. The only people picking up 25Ks happen to be matched against each other. They do pick up bonus points and essentially walk away with they walk away with 3 points each. So yeah, works out pretty well for them. And then finally, for Dams of the World, I picked Aston versus Mr. John Boy, which that was the closest match of the division, and Mr. John Boy does pick up a bonus point there, despite losing the match, so a bit of a consolation prize there. But yeah, this is again a fairly difficult seed with the two rounds in there and a Highland round. So
Had Ukraine
yeah,
in there as well for good measure.
oh my, they really drew the short end of the stick there, but or the short straw. I forget my idioms, but yeah, Aston still put up a really good score, 23,795, which is the second highest in the division. And so yeah, a well-earned win for them right there.
Yep. A bit of an unfortunate one there for Mr. John Boy as well. We haven't mentioned it yet, but he 25K both the first 2 maps as well, first 2 weeks. So still a good performance, obviously, as you mentioned, a bonus point, but not quite enough to keep the win streak up, or, it was actually a win streak. Red carded matchup in week 1 and then a nice win in week 2. For my picks, I did pick one of those in week 2, but to start it off, I went for Sortha against Aston in week 1 in Malta. We had similar amount of 25Ks in Division 5A as we had in Division 5B. One less, but also, one red card. So one less opportunity. Yeah, both of them pretty good scores. Zorta, as we quickly mentioned earlier, with the 6 minutes 40, the quickest time by quite some margin as well, including Division 5B. Actually, the 4 fastest times in the Division 5 seed were all from Division 5A, before we had Damia with the 5th fastest time and the fastest Division 5B. Aston, unfortunately, just a little bit too slow, 14 minutes 8, being 22 seconds behind Laban Greb, who picked up the last bonus point. So a little bit unfortunate there for him. Should have just been slightly faster, but he'll still pick up 2 points. For week 2, yeah, we have Mr. John Boy with his nice 25K in Israel over Alfie, who I think just about didn't get a bonus point. Let me just quickly check. Yes, 7th in terms of total score in that week. So a little unfortunate there for him. But it is what it is. Still, I think 21K is still a decent score in Israel. Still quite a few people who had below that, just not rewarded with a point. And the opposite of that, rewarded with a point, or 3 points in this case, for maybe not the best performance, is going to be Geoclem against Penguin in the Dams of the World seed. Again, we've talked enough about how rough that seed was, But obviously, you're going to count yourself lucky if you actually manage to pick up 3 points with a score below 19,000 points. But yeah, you only have to beat whoever's put in front of you, and Geoclem did that in that instance and will be very happy about those 3 points, I imagine.
Yeah, I'm sure.
No, he'll be very angry. All right, let's look
Mhm.
at the table then. Division 5A is similarly close to Division 5B in some sense, but has a little bit of a gap in there.
Yeah, for sure. Cookers, Mr. Fish, Labandra, Bombadil, they have an upward battle for sure. Bombadil especially. Out of them, I will say with Steiner's red card, they have a little more breathing room. Uh, they only need to get one spot out of the relegation spots. But yeah, there's already that gap between Penguin and Cougars, so they're gonna have to start picking up wins and a little more frequently to make up that gap. But at the top, we have a points tie for the first 3 spots already, and yeah, it's still very close. Only 2 points separating Zorktaf in first from Penguin in seventh. So yeah, essentially any match between them in these next few weeks is going to be crucial to give them a commanding lead going further into the season.
Yeah, super close at the top. Just 2 points down to Penguin in seventh. Total scores are dropping off slightly. You can see Zorta really good performances so far with his 74,000 points overall. But even then, the differences aren't that huge. We have that little gap between Penguin and Cougars, but we'll see whether that gap can be closed in the coming weeks or whether it'll get even larger. Other than that, I don't think we've seen anything too surprising so far in this season. I think Mr. Fish may be a bit lower than you would normally expect. He's been mostly around the upper midfield positions in his appearances in past Reddit League seasons. His total score is still indicative of that, just maybe not the luckiest matchups so far for him. But yeah, let's talk about the upcoming weeks then, Carp. What's your picks for weeks 4 to 6?
So my pick for week 4 is Geoclem versus Aston. This another one of those higher mid-table matches, and like we said, with the table so close, um, it, whoever wins that match is going to be in a really good position to take the lead. And in fact, depending on how the match is above them go, they may or may not take the lead in the division standings, which should give them some peace of mind, I imagine. Uh, and then for week 5, I have Zorkta versus Drone Boy. This one being battle at the top, and assuming that they can stay up there, this will probably decide which one of them keeps that spot, at least going into the mid-season break. And yeah, it'll be interesting to see how they do on Lesotho that week. Um, uh, we'll see whether they can keep up their 25K record
Probably not.
going in there. Well, they'll have to show us what they can do.
Mm-hmm.
And finally, for week 6 in the Philippines, I have Aston versus Alfie. Again, pretty much the same story there. And these are all, well, except for Zorkta versus John Boy. The other two are French derbies as well, which should, should make for some interesting matches for sure. And yeah,
Mm-hmm.
we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, since you happened to pick out most of the upper table matchups, let me go for some of the ones further down in the table. In week 4, we have Labangreb against Bombadil, current 10th against current 11th. So already a very important game for both of them, for Bombadil especially, to possibly manage to not make that or not let that gap get any bigger to those non-relegation spots, or at least non-direct relegation spots. In week 5, we have similar situation for Bombadil. Now are the important weeks coming up for him. His game against Mr. Fish, straight away, 10th and 9th after each other. Unfortunately, not against Cougars in week 6. That would have been funny, but no. He's mentioned before to me that this season he doesn't really have a lot of time to practice, and he's obviously looking to play and do as best as he can, but doesn't quite have the time required to put as much practice into some of those countries as they may need, especially your Lesotho, your Philippines, whatever. So could be some rough weeks ahead for him, but we'll see what he can pull off. And for week 6, we don't have a direct matchup down there between people fighting for those relegation or fighting against those relegation spots. So I guess I will pick Penguin against Zorgta for that week. Zorgta obviously currently leading the division. Very good performances so far. But Penguin's also a veteran at this stage. I think also probably season 4 may have been his first season. Don't quote me on that. It's a
sounds
guess.
about right.
It might have been season 4, it might have been season 5. But he's been here for a few. I think it was season 5, actually, looking at it. Whatever. He's been here for a while, and we'll see what he can do. Also had a decent start of the season, maybe out of that upper group with 7 points or more, the one with the lowest total score. So he'll have to pull out a pretty good performance if he wants to challenge Sorgtha in the Philippines, but I'm sure he can pull it off. Now, going forward into Division 4 and looking at the results for weeks 1 to 3 in Division 4B.
First off, I have Germany versus Solar, which was the only 25k draw for the week. There were a bunch more 25ks in the division, but they kind of got unlucky again, getting paired up against each other, and they'll only take away 3 points each as a result. But still, a very good result from them, especially when quite a few people in the division missed 25ks, which I found slightly surprising. And then week 2, I have Jake versus Dromi. Dromi showing up twice here. And this was the closest match of the division. Dromi picking up a win, and Jake, despite getting one of is that the second highest score in the division? Yeah, got the second highest score, but still walked away with a loss. So unfortunate for him there. Does take a bonus point, but Jake didn't get a 25k in Malta and got unlucky in Israel too, which doesn't bode well for him. And then for week 3, I have Patriots versus Klemu. This one was the match with the largest point differential. So Patriots really not having a good time on that map, and Klemu picks a win off of them. And this is probably like the largest point differential that you might see this season. It's
I don't think so, looking at week 5 coming up, but it is a pretty large score differential for a world map, yes. Okay, let's move over to my picks then. And I did pick for week 1 Antoine Pilot against Danny J. Antoine a bit lucky, I guess, considering he was technically relegated last season, but then benefited from Rien de Rien dropping out, who he lost his relegation playoff game against, so was allowed to stay in Division 4, and proved in week 1 that he does deserve to be here with a nice 25k. As you pointed out, a bit fewer 25ks in Division 4 on Malta than we've seen in Division 5. Division 4A had even less. They only had three 25Ks, if I'm not missing one here, while Division 4B at least still had six. Also, the nice bonus factor of that is exactly half. So everyone who had a 25K and didn't win, of which there are Dromi and Solar Sensei, did also automatically pick up a bonus point for that as well. Danny, a bit of a rough score there for him, only 15K in Malta. Not the greatest start for him after he initially started Reddit League in Season 6, got relegated from Division 4, had a very rough time back then, and then got re-promoted last season. And, well, the start of this season hasn't looked that much better for him, unfortunately, than his initial appearance in Division 4 2 seasons ago. In week 2, I went for the game between Antoine Pilot and Jack. Similar story here as we had with Geoclem against Penguin in Division 5. A very low scoring win there for Antoine Pilot. He did actually have the second lowest score of the division. But that was enough because Jack had an even lower one. So he'll take those 3 points very happily after the 4 points in Malta. On top of that, well, maybe a bit on the luckier side for this, but sometimes you have to be a bit lucky. And one person who isn't a bit lucky is Jake. As you pointed out, his Israel loss already, Dams of the World didn't go much better. 23.6K, still a very decent score. Not quite the second highest score this time around. I think it is only the 6th highest score. Still enough for bonus points, but unfortunately, again, up against a person who scored just that little bit higher in Sepp Kirst, who will take home the win there. Looking at the table, that leaves us with these standings. Some surprises in there, definitely. Some things you also probably would have expected. What are your takeaways from this one?
Yeah, I think the biggest surprise for me is Jake sitting in those relegation spots at the bottom. Definitely not where I expected to see him, but like we said, a couple of unlucky matchups. We'll see if he can turn that around. And yeah, the promotion spots might be a little far to reach. It's definitely possible. Don't get me wrong, but yeah, we'll see if he can claw his way out from there. Meanwhile, at the top, Clement and Solar, like we saw in 5B, I believe, they at least have 2 points on anyone behind them. So yeah, a little bit of a gap, but it's still very early in the season. Basically, anyone down to 7th can pick up a win and get right in the promotion battle there.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you already pointed out, Jake, definitely the surprise pick out of that division standings so far. Only 2 points. His total score is still up there, not quite as high as the top 3, who are very, very close together in Klimu, Solar Sensei, and Dromi, all around 73,500 points. Beyond that, I think most of it is relatively expected. We have the likes of Danny, Patriots, and Varum, who you probably would have looked at as people who can still pull up or pull off a good performance here or there, but maybe not quite on the same level as some of the others in the division a bit further down. Varum actually with a pretty good total score overall, with 70K, just maybe a bit unlucky with matchups so far, or just dropped slightly too many points in unfortunate places. But Patriots and Danny with 57 and 55K are dropping quite a bit behind. But we'll see in the coming weeks whether they can turn it around and save themselves from those relegation spots. Speaking of those next few weeks, who are your picks for weeks 4 to 6 in Division 4B?
So yeah, the first for week 4, I went with Clemu versus Dromi. That's one of the higher table matchups, and yeah, it's gonna be an important week for Dromi because a win there means they can get into the same top of the table bracket and pull off a gap with folks behind. And like we said, with Chile being a fairly easy country to 25K. You definitely have that opportunity to get the extra point from the 25K there, and yeah, I can see both Dromi and Clemu getting that 25K fairly easily. So yeah, very excited to see what they can pull off. Maybe we'll get one of those 25K draws there, which is always nice to see. For week 5, I went with Patriots versus Jake. Uh, so it's one of the bottom table matches, but it's also the American Derby, and um, I guess it would be also like an East Coast versus West Coast Derby. So um, kind of an interesting matchup that way, but also it's Lesotho, and
Mhm.
we'll see what it does for either of their total scores there. Yeah, that's not going to be a high scoring week. Uh, so yeah, it'll be interesting. I think probably Jake has the upper hand, but Patriots has pulled off a win this season. Maybe he can pull off another. We'll have to see about that. And finally, in the Philippines, I went for Seketer versus Sepkirst. That's one of the mid-table matchups, and they're really on the brink of falling into the relegation battle, which as we've said, isn't that important this early in the season. But yeah, you really don't want to be falling behind this early because it, um, you know, a loss over there is going to put um, uh, whoever loses on the back foot going into the second half of the season.
Mhm. Uh, Speaking of American derbies, Jake has both of them back to back. For week 4, he has his against Solar Sensei, which I think is also going to be a very interesting matchup. Obviously, they're second and 11th looking at the table, but I totally think that that can be a very, very close game. It just depends on Jake's mindset a bit. But yeah, he can totally also 25K a Chile seed. I wouldn't be surprised if he can pull that off. For week 5, I of course going to go with Klimu against Sola Sensei, currently first against second in the table. Very important matchup going forward as well, and especially in a country like Lesotho where we're probably not seeing a draw. It's definitely going to help one of the two of them to secure their place in the upper echelons. Do you say that? Do you pronounce that different?
Something like
Echelons.
that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
something like that. Um, yeah, very important matchup there. Let's just gloss over that. And then for week 6, I am going to go with Danny against Patriots. The two people so far who've had the worst start, at least in terms of total score. Obviously, Patriots more points on the table than Jake. And I think that is the kind of matchup that you need to win if you want to at least have a realistic chance of staying in the division. Especially for Danny. Patriots obviously already with one win on the table. For him, that would just be a nice extra win to maximize his chances of making it. For Danny, I think if he loses that one, it's looking really rough. Unless he can either turn his form around completely or just surprise a bit and get a bit lucky with some of the matchups later on in the season. But yeah, looking over to Division 4, Aiden, and your picks for weeks 1 to 3.
Yeah, so for week 1, I went with Luton Compass.
Yeah,
I'm
just
I'm gonna get so many of these wrong.
yeah, just go with Luton or Luton or
Luton.
whatever.
Okay.
Leave the complete
Luton.
part out.
Yeah. So yeah, Luton versus Awakelock, and they're Luton picking up a 25K. Like we said, this was probably one of the more difficult Malta seeds to 25K. So we only had 3 on the side of Division 4, and yeah, Luton was one of them. Picks up a win against Wakelock, and yeah, just kind of we didn't have any 25K draws here, so all the 25Kers got kind of lucky there. But yeah, this is one of them, and
Mm,
Luton walked away with 4 points. which bodes really well for them in the standings. For week 2, I went with Xander versus Axel. Um, both of them ending really close together, only 412 points separating them on what seems to not have been quite a very difficult seed. A lot of scores over 24K. So yeah, probably just came down to one round each, and yeah, Xander picks up the win there. But Axel does take a bonus point away um, for their good performance. Is that like I think it's like the fifth highest in the division or something? Fifth, something like that.
Mm.
Uh, so yeah, they do pick up a bonus point. And then finally for Damsels World, I went with 4ZI77
Forzy.
versus 4Z versus Hugo. Again, 4Z was the only one to pick up a 25K there. And so yeah, picked up a win against Hugo, who hasn't had the best season so far, as we'll see in a second. But yeah, despite putting up um, a 22.5, yeah, not quite good enough for a bonus point either, especially on the world map. Uh, yeah, unfortunate for them.
Mm-hmm. The picks I had for those first 3 weeks in Malta, I went for Freckles against Morica. Morica, one of those 3 people I mentioned before who did manage that 25k in Division 4A in Malta. Freckles, unfortunately, with a bit of a rough start, 21.8k as well, is I think just one position out of the top 6. Let me just check. Yes, so
I think so.
just about not getting a bonus point there. Rough for him. Week 2, I went for Wakelock against Geofogger. As always, Wakelock with the performances when you least expect them. Getting a nice 24k in Israel and taking points away from Geofogger there. I think similar situation here for Geofogger. I don't think he was quite 7th. I think he was a bit further behind, but there wasn't many points that he was lacking to get into those top 6. I think he would have needed what was it? I think
That's like
Wakelock's score was actually the 6th best score, so about
oh
about 300 points more, but then it wouldn't have mattered anyway. Either way, a
yeah.
bit unlucky there for him. Just 227 points behind Wakelock. And then for Dams of the World, I picked another very close matchup. Morica again had a very good start of the season, and yeah, 200 points ahead of Xander, exactly, who does still pick up a bonus point, 24.4k, still very decent, but just not quite enough there for a win or a draw in that case. Which leaves us with the following table. And in this one, we also kind of see a little bit of a gap throughout. It's not quite as close as some of the other divisions.
Yeah, for sure. At the bottom we have Geofogger and Hugo, who really haven't had the best start to the season, despite having a fairly high total score, especially compared to Danny Blonde and Wakelock above them. But yeah, the two of them unlucky with their matches, I guess, and yeah, they don't have any wins so far, and yeah, they already have a bit of an uphill battle right there. And yeah, like you said, Morica and Forzi at the top, they have 10 points apiece, so got really lucky with their first matches. Well, I'm sure there's skill involved too, but yeah, they're probably going to cement their spots near the top. So we'll see. There's a split in the middle between Xander and Funderlap, but uh, yeah, it's as we've said uh, all the time so far. Still early in the season, and yeah, almost anyone could change places, especially in the mid-table right there.
Yeah. Still, I think looking at the division, in terms of total score, it is actually fairly close still. Like from Morica down all the way down to Xander, who still has like 69,000 points. That's still very decent as well. Looking at the positions, I think we don't have a very surprising positioning in the standings here. All the people you expected to be near the top kind of are. Same, obviously, the other way around as well. Forzy, I don't know about surprising, but just got promoted from Division 5, so had a very good start into Division 4 as well. Potentially looking at just skipping through it and making it straight into Division 3 next season. Very good performances from him so far. On the other side of the table, you mentioned it, Geofogo and Hugo, good total scores, or at least decent still. Not quite the luck of the draw in terms of matchups so far, but the season, as you said, is still long. And, well, obviously, we do have, I think, the only person who actually has a home matchup this season. Maybe someone's from Utah, actually. But other than that, we have Hugo in Chile, which I'm assuming you picked, because if you didn't, then I'll pick it. I don't have it in my head at the moment anymore. But yeah,
I don't
well,
think I did.
okay, well, then you can go ahead and tell us who you did pick for the matchups for weeks 4 to 6.
Yeah. So I went with Sheldon and Axel as one of the higher table matchups, and with about 3 points to the folks ahead in first and second, that match is going to be pretty important for them to stay close to the to Mark and Forzi at the top. And again, Chile being a very 25 capable country, it give them an even better chance to increase their lead at the top. Especially since we've also talked about how there's a bit of a gap forming in the middle of the table. Any wins or 25Ks behind their division are really going to serve to widen that gap and make it harder for the likes of Xander and Freckles to make up the gap and get into the promotion battles. For week 5, I went with Xander versus Freckles. On that same note, this match is probably going to decide which of them gets to get into that promotion battle, if at all. And yeah, whoever wins that is going to make the jump up, and whoever doesn't is probably in for a bit of a relegation battle that we'll have to see about. Depending on how Geofogo and Hugo do, it might only be a battle for the relegation playoff spot, but we'll have to see about that. And then finally, for week 6, I went with Wakelok versus Axel. This one's probably a little more clear cut, but the division is still pretty close. So depending on how the results end up at that stage of the season, this could still be an important match for Wakelok. Probably as a last chance to break into the upper ranks. But of course, looking that far ahead, we'll have to see how the table shakes up. Yeah, shakes up at that point.
Mm-hmm. So, since you didn't do it, I'll pick Hugo against Morica for week 4. First against 12th in the table, you'd think, well, I mean, obviously Morica's gonna win that, but it's in Chile. So, you'd hope that Hugo has a good chance to pull off an upset here, or at least, get close to a 25K and maybe get a draw, depending on how well Morica does. Looking forward to seeing how he does there. And that could be a very important matchup for him, obviously, looking at his current points in the table. He probably would have preferred to play against someone else rather than first in the table. But, that's not how it goes this time around, and he'll have to do his best in his home country. For week 5, I'm going to pick Luta against Forzi. Very interesting matchup there as well. Both pretty high up in the table, both with good performances so far. It could be a close one. Lesotho is always a bit rough. I don't know how much practice they're going to put in, it's probably the country so far that will benefit the most from practice. I mean, obviously, it helps for stuff like Malta as well. Um, Definitely doesn't hurt for Israel or Chile, Philippines, whatever. But I think Lesotho is the one where if you get a rough seed and you haven't practiced, it's not going to be a surprise if you drop like below 10,000 points on the seed. Um, and it's probably also the map where you can most easily get a win out of practicing. So looking forward to see if either of them do. Could be very important coming towards the end of the season. Well, even though it's not even past the halfway points, but those points could be crucial. And then for week 6, I will go with Danny Blondes against Geofogger. Kind of a matchup a bit further down in the table. Danny so far with 3 points, Geofogger no points on the table yet, but Geofogger quite a bit of a higher total score. So in terms of like, if you just average that out, they're roughly around a similar level going into the rest of the season. Maybe Geofogger can pull back a win here and make his way out of those relegation spots. I think he was near there as well last season. I think he won his relegation playoff game, if I remember correctly. So he's probably going to hope to not have to go through that again. But at the same time, he should also probably start picking up points soon if he wants that to be the case. All right, then we're through with the split divisions, and we're finally making our way to the one-way divisions, I guess. And we'll have a look at Division 3, where you picked out the following for the first weeks.
Yeah, so for week 1, I went with Hexalt versus Close, one of 225k draws that week. And this is another one of the ones where Close got a little unlucky with the slowest 25k of the division, and so sadly misses out on the bonus point. The only 25k, the only person to 25k and not pick up a bonus point there. So unfortunate for them, but it is a draw, and Hexalt does pick up the bonus point there. So yeah, good scores by the both of them. But yeah, close kind of unlucky there. For week 2, I went with my matchup against Biquet. Biquet pulling off a 25k and picks up the win. I put up the second highest score. Oh no, third highest score of the division, and still lost, which still stings. But that is how it goes sometimes. I do pick up a bonus point from that, so I at least have that. But definitely unfortunate for me to be playing against Biquet that week. And then finally, on Damp of the World, I went with Ollie versus Offendani. A really close matchup with some scores that are a little further down on the table. But yeah, only 312 points separating them. And yeah, Ollie, unfortunately, picking up a loss there. And despite not doing too badly compared to some of the other scores in the division. And yeah, also sadly, no bonus point for them either.
Yeah, you mentioned Close not picking up the bonus point in week 1. He was 19 seconds too slow in 7th place compared to Ovendani, who had a red card matchup in week 1. So we'll be a bit annoyed about that one, but especially because Ovendani wouldn't have needed to be in the top 6 to get 4 points anyway, but it is what it is. For my picks, I went for your game against Ollie in week 1. Both very good performances, 225Ks, perfect draw there. You had the second fastest time, Ollie with the 4th fastest time, just 3 seconds slower than Tante, who had the 3rd fastest. So just overall, very nice geoguesser. Well done.
Thank you.
Then in week 2, I went for the matchup between Ovendani and Ordboka. both not with the greatest scores. Ovendani with a 22k, more so in sort of the average range. I think probably 7th highest, 6th or 7th highest. No, probably 7th or 8th highest actually. But good enough. Ordboka had a bit of a nightmare in Israel, not really getting much on the board there with 14k. Probably can't be too disappointed about losing that one. Maybe about his own performances, but not about getting no points for those 14,000. And then for week 3, I picked one of the only draws that has come from the world map, actually, if I remember correctly, where Exalt and Postek managed to get very close to each other, not near the 25k, just somewhere in the middle, around 23,500 points. Both of them as well ending up in the top half of the division, so very nice for them. I think they were 5th and 6th, although I could be wrong about that. So yeah, just a nice draw around the middle of the table in that, middle of the table in that specific week. And yeah, speaking of table, looking at it, we're left with this after 3 weeks. Quite a few high scorers there with 11 points, which I think we haven't seen yet.
We have not.
Yeah, nice big amount of points there, and then quite a drop off to some of the people further behind.
Yeah, for sure. Biket and Tante really performing really well these first 3 weeks, and yeah, Offendani is also pretty close up to them. But yeah, Biket and Tante, I think their 225Ks really helped them at this point as well. Meanwhile, there's a gap behind Offendani, so like Hexalt through probably Pastek still in it for the promotion playoff battle at least. We'll see if any of us can break into the guaranteed promotion spots as the season progresses. But then behind us, there's a little bit more of a gap with Nakura or Boca enclosed, who have an uphill battle to break into the playoff spots, and then we have WTF, who hasn't had the best start to the season, but only 2 points ahead to close. So if they can pick up a win, or maybe wins plural, that'll help them in the standings a bit to get out of that relegation spot.
I'm sure they'd like wins plural, but it's not always as easy as just saying you want them. But yeah, I think you summarized it quite nicely. Probably looking at the top 7 mainly for those promotion spots, but for the people further behind, those top 3, you're going to require them to actually drop points to catch up to them. We'll see if they do so playing against each other. We'll see if they do so within the next few weeks. But yeah, down there, obviously, Nakiro, actually looking at his total score, kind of belongs in the upper group, just hasn't quite worked out for him in terms of points on the table so far, but that can also still turn around. We have a red card here as well, of course, and it's been you, Ollie, and Ovendani so far who have had the benefit of playing against them. And yeah, let's take a look then at who they'll be playing in the upcoming weeks.
For week 4, I went with Tante versus Hexalt, one of the French derbies and one of the higher ones in the division. Somehow, with Hexalt being 4th, they're still 3 points ahead to Tante, so even a win in Chile will only buy them against Tante, or maybe with the 25k, it's a different story. But it'll be very important for Hexalt to maybe get a shot at getting into those guaranteed playoff spots before Biket and Tante perhaps run away with it early in the season. That's going to be interesting to watch. On the other end, I have Ordboka versus Nakiro for week 5. Especially with it being Lesotho, I don't think there's going to be a draw there, so essentially whoever wins that match will maybe become the 8th player in the promotion battle that we spoke of earlier. And then the other one's gonna have an even harder time getting out of the relegation spots. So yeah, very important matchup for Nakira and Ordboka. We'll see if Nakira can keep that upward trajectory going. But yeah, and then uh, finally for week 6, I have Nakira versus Pastek, another French derby right there, and one in the mid table. If Nakira does win his match against Ordboka, then he's going to be in a much better place to play against Pastek and perhaps leapfrog Pastek and get even higher into the rankings. But yeah, we'll see if he can maintain that upward trajectory.
I see you picked out the first mentioned matchup of every single week for weeks 4 to week 6. You just went through and yeah, first one first. Yeah, there we go. Yes. For my picks for weeks 4 to 6, I am gonna go with Biquet against Ollie for week 4. Kind of the upper edge and the lower edge of that upper group in general. Both having a quite good start to the season so far. I think both are more than capable of getting a very good score in Chile. Obviously, Biquet, I wouldn't be surprised if the seed allows it. If we see another perfect score from him, he's definitely capable of it. Ollie has had one perfect score so far. I haven't seen too many of him actually. If I think back, might just be misremembering, but I can't remember too many from him. So we'll see if he can pull off a great performance to challenge Biquet in that matchup. For week 5, I will be going with the matchup between Carp, you against Ovendani. Again, similar situation that you had with your game between Tante and Exalt, where we were kind of in the upper areas of that promotion battle. Very important game. You have the slightly higher total score so far, actually highest total score of the division. Quite nice. And Ovendani a little bit lower down. Only the 8th highest score, but that doesn't matter if you've got 10 points on the table. At least after 3 weeks, it will matter if he has 10 points on the table after 10 weeks. But we'll see. We'll see. Definitely a crucial matchup in that promotion fight, though. And then for week 6, obviously, how could I not pick Exalt against Biquet? Two very, very good players. Another French derby besides the one you mentioned between Nakiro and Pastek. And I'm really looking forward to see how that one goes. I think both are more than capable of getting great scores in the Philippines as well. And yeah, another one that could be crucial in deciding those direct promotion spots and promotion playoff spots as well. Then, after Division 3, what comes next?
Division 2.
Correct. So, weeks 1 to 3 from Division 2. Go.
Yeah, so I went to Diesel versus Lunacy. I guess I'm biased there, with like my two teammates going up against each other. But yeah, Diesel picked up a 25k. Lunacy just misses there and loses to Diesel, but he does pick up a bonus point there, which is going to be good for him. But yeah, definitely unfortunate to miss out on the 25k in Malta. There were only there were 5 25k, so Lunacy was the highest out of the non-perfect scorers, and so yeah, that bodes well for him. Meanwhile, for week 2, I went with Rafa versus Simon Goose. Simon, who's been putting in some very good performances, um, in not just Reddit League but in other competitions as well. Puts up a 24k and picks up a win. Got slightly lucky with the matchup with Rafa really not having a good time in Israel. Just barely over 10,000 points there. So yeah. they really haven't had the best start. Yeah, um, Simon's still picking up a well-deserved win right there. Uh, and then finally on Dams of the World, I went with Fungus versus Guilo. I suppose this is also another teammate matchup now that I think about it.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah, Guilo didn't have the best time on the world map, only 22.5. Um, and Fungus does pick up the win with a 24,000 there. Somehow Guilo's score is good enough for a bonus point there. Again, just barely being the last person to earn a bonus point, I think. Or yeah, I I think that's right. Yeah, yeah, literally just 54 points ahead of Rafa, who was the first one who wouldn't be eligible for a bonus point there. So yeah, got slightly lucky on the score there. Picks up a bonus point. But yeah, still a good win for Fungus.
I think it actually Guelo was fifth and Rafa was sixth, so not quite. Had a little bit more leeway
Oh,
there, but
oh, I missed. Okay, I see what I missed.
nonetheless, yeah, very nice for him to pick up that bonus point. I went for the match between, and I'm going to keep calling him Max, for those of you who remember from 2 or 3 seasons ago was his, I think 2 seasons ago in season 6 was his last season he's participated in. I think he's been here since forever, basically. He played in season 2, that I know. I don't think he played in season 1. No. So
I
he's
wasn't around then.
yeah, he's been here since season 2 and took one gap season basically last time around, and is gonna come back with a nice win over Rafa with the third lowest score though. Rafa with the lowest score, so in the kind of returnee against newcomer matchup, Max picking up a win there. And I mean, if you're getting 3 points for 19.9k in Malta, you're definitely taking it.
Mhm.
In week 2, I went for Fungus against Samo. Another fairly low scoring win, actually. Fungus with the lowest points for any of the winners. Interestingly enough, though, the matchups were kind of even in the sense that the top 6 in the week all won their matches, and the bottom 7, obviously, bottom 6, obviously, all lost their matches then. Yeah, so that also means no bonus points for any of the losers, including Samo there, unfortunately for him. Was the lowest matchup of the division. All of the other matchups had at least 4,000 points between winner and loser. And then in week 3 in Dams of the World, we are finally getting Rafa's first win on the table against another newcomer in Dorop with a decent performance, 22.5k. Mentioned it before, sixth highest. Dorop, of course, therefore also not getting a bonus points. Unfortunate for him. I don't think he was super far away. But, well, obviously, because, 1,200 points to Rafa, who was sixth, yes. But yeah, the newcomers here not having the best of seasons so far, except for Simon Goose, maybe, as we see looking at the table. Simon Goose in fourth place, the other two newcomers in 11th and 12th.
Yeah, definitely. We do see Fungus and Diesel at the top of the table with 10 points apiece, 3 points behind to Pestetli and Simon Goose. So yeah, they've already opened up a bit of a gap, but that's still only a win away. So if any of them pick up wins against Fungus or Diesel, that's definitely going to help them get up into the guaranteed promotion spots. But yeah, it's kind of just like steadily the points steadily go down further down the table. So it's really Dodop who has the uphill battle. Rafa, RT Lewis, Samo, F Bresser, even with a 25, even with a win in Chile, they'll be up and fighting for promotion spots. With a 25k, they'll be in an even better position to take them on. So yeah, this is probably one of the closer divisions, even in the mid table. So yeah, really excited to see what comes out of Division 2.
Yeah, definitely very high quality as well throughout there. Slightly surprised so far by Lunacy struggling a little bit, but yeah, his total score is still up there. Season is still long. We'll see what he can do going forward. And yeah, speaking of going forward, what's your picks for weeks 4 to 6?
So for week 4, I went with Max versus Espresso. That's one of those mid-table matchups, and another one of those where a win for Espresso will propel them up into the promotion battle. A loss for Max might really hinder his upward progress there and leave him fighting against relegation. Um, Also depending on how the other matchups go, of course. For week 5, I went with Fungus versus Diesel, top of the table matchup there, and with Lesotho up on the roster that is definitely going one of their ways. That's not ending in a tie. So yeah, definitely very excited for that. Whoever wins that is going to really be cementing their position at the top of the table, I think, especially given how their seasons have panned out so far. And then finally for week 6, Perchetli versus Diesel. Not only is that another one of the uh, inter-teammate derbies, I guess, but this time it's second and third. So Diesel really has two important matches in Lesotho and Philippines, no less. So yeah, gonna be a very important 2 weeks for him, and probably a very difficult 2 weeks. And yeah, that's gonna make or break the season for both Diesel and for Pescettli, I think, because that's gonna be one of Pescetli's last chances to get into those guaranteed promotion spots.
Mm-hmm. So for my picks, in week 4, I went with Guelo against Lunacy. Currently 6th and
Mhm.
7th in the table, very close to each other. Similar total score as well. And yeah, I think generally Chile is probably a country that Lunacy would be quite good at in terms of, there's relatively plentiful information. And you shouldn't have too many troubles pinpointing that fairly quickly. But we'll see how it goes. We'll see if Guelo can
Mhm.
put up a challenge for him. And yeah, I think kind of also already one of those games. If you want to at least get into the direct promotion spots, probably a game you have to win either way. Obviously, promotion playoff spots are still available even if you don't. Um, for week 5, I picked out the game between Pastetli and Simon Goose. You picked out the game between first and second. I picked out the one between third and fourth. Not a very, very high quality matchup there. In Lesotho provides all the quality matchups. That's going to be fun.
Of course.
And yeah, kind of similar story there. If you want to get direct promotion spots, then that is definitely a game you want to win. For those two, I think you can still reach them even if you don't. But obviously, playing against a direct competitor for those spots, you definitely rather win than not in a match like that. And then for week 6, I went with the game between Rafa and RT Lewis, kind of a bit more towards the bottom of the table. Rafa so far having a really rough time with most maps, but did pick up one win so far against Dodop. And RT Lewis kind of still towards that upper group if you look at his total score, but a little bit behind them mostly. So it's definitely a matchup he will want to win, kind of a must win, I guess. But Philippines is a rough country to predict for, especially a matchup like this, where it's hard to say really how much practice these people may put in on how much knowledge they may already have about Filipino provinces. I think if either of them does, that could be a pretty crucial advantage and might decide the game. If neither of them do, this might end up with another pretty low scoring win. But, we'll see. We'll see how it goes. And that leaves us with only one division to go. So let's look at Division 1 and your picks for the first 3 weeks.
Yeah, so for week 1, I went with Barry versus Murdoch. What the only match that didn't have any 25Ks. Um, which it's a bit of a rarity in Division 1, I would say, especially for a map like Malta. But Barry does pick up a win. Murdoch not having the best time. And actually neither did Barry, I guess, with 20K there. Probably just missed uh one round completely, is my guess.
Mm.
Um, but yeah, Barry probably getting pretty lucky there to not be going up against one of the what's it? One, two, that's 625Ks in the division.
Mm.
So yeah, got a bit lucky there. Um, Meanwhile, for week 2, I went with Ottawa versus Torto Radio. Um, that one, yeah, Ottawa didn't have the best time in Israel. I guess neither did half of their division. Uh, but yeah, Tata Radio got 20,700 points, which that's still one of the highest of the division. That's what, like, fourth highest. Yeah. Um, and so yeah, good win there. Anna was the only one to get a 25K, which is insane. But yeah, well done to Toto there. And then meanwhile, week 3, I picked Anna versus Baseman. Anna getting very close to a 25K. Not quite there, but easily the highest score of the division for Damage of the World on what I'm sure is a pretty difficult seed based on those scores.
Mm.
Um, and then Baseman still put up a really good score, 22.9, which I think is like still upper half. Yeah, because he did pick up a bonus point off of that. So yeah, a bit unlucky going up against one of the strongest players in the division, but well, this is Division 1.
Yeah.
Uh, and so yeah, Baseman, I guess, got lacking a bit, and yeah, unfortunate loss through Anna there.
Hmm. So for my picks of the first 3 weeks, I picked Toto Radio against Mada for the first week. Mada, the only newcomer in Division 1, with a great start to it. The third fastest 25K as well, behind Anna and Toto Radio, who had the fastest 25K. So both of them with a very, very good game, picking up 3 points for their efforts. For Toto Radio as well, quite nice as he 2 seasons ago debuted in Division 1 and also had quite a rough time, similarly to Danny's situation in Division 4. Just Toto Radio seems to have bounced back a bit nicer, and after getting promoted last season, has now started off Division 1 with some nice 3 points. For week 2, I picked Anna against Verdok. Obviously, Anna, as you mentioned, with the only 25K in a very difficult Israel seed, and Verdok struggling quite a lot. Still, like, only the third lowest scorer. There were two people who had even lower scores than that. But obviously, that's gonna be quite a hit for the score differential. Then I picked my own game for week 3, Dams of the Worlds, and a bit of an unfortunate one. Yeah, it was a fairly difficult seed. I could have won the game if one round had just gone slightly differently, but I didn't. So Bastel will pick up a nice 3 points for that. I'm just thinking, who did I play against in the semifinals last season? Was that against Bastel?
Oh,
I have like a memory that's
mhm.
telling me it was. It was, yeah, yeah. So
Okay.
no revenge. Well, I'll
Mhm.
have to wait for the playoffs this season, I guess.
Mhm.
If both of us make it there, we'll take a look as currently looking at the table here, it is looking that way with me in third and Bastel in fourth. But season's still long, not quite as long for Division 1 as it is for the other divisions, because we have two less players and therefore we'll stop after week 9. But that still means we're only 1/3 of the way through, and a lot can change beyond that.
Yeah, for sure. And we do see Bastel still in the battle for promotion. maybe he's gonna have a well. I'm sure he definitely wants a second shot at retaining his title, but yeah, Anna and Toto do take up the top two spots. At least a 2 point gap to you in third. And so yeah, Toto after promoting up has really upped his game, and he's gonna put up a good fight to show that he really has what it takes to stay in Division One, and that he shouldn't have ever been relegated. Meanwhile, Mata, as you said, the only newcomer, is still doing pretty well to stay out of relegation. They're right on the brink of it, but yeah, Baseman, Ottawa, Barry, and Wurdock haven't had the best starts to the season. Wurdock especially. Um, and so yeah, we'll see if Mata can perhaps make a play for the playoff spots, which would um, uh, be really impressive to see if they can make it into that battle in their first season in Reddit League.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, excited to see where that goes.
Yeah, well, then I'm sure you picked some of Mother's games for weeks 4 and 6. Well, we'll see. We'll see. Tell us. Oops, I shouldn't have closed that. Tell us about who you picked.
Yeah, so for week 4, I went with Bastel versus Baseman. This one's probably one of Baseman's last chances to maybe make a play for the playoff spots. Um, as you said, the season here is shorter, and so every match is just that much more crucial. And Baseman, right on the brink of relegation, or at least a relegation playoff, really needs a match like this to go his way if he wants any chance to stay out of it and, like I said, perhaps make a play for the playoffs. Um, for week 5, I went with Anna versus Totoradia, one of the matchups at the top. And given that they already have a little bit of a gap behind, this matchup is just going to seal whoever probably keeps that playoff spot. And yeah, with the shorter season, they have uh, a higher chance of probably staying up there, even if they don't have the best matchups later in the season. And then finally, I went with Basement versus Ottawa. Um, this one's again one of those that will be very important for Ottawa. In this case, if they want to get out of the relegation spots, and depending on how Baseman's a few weeks ago, it could be an important week for him as well. Uh, yeah, Baseman has a couple of important weeks coming up.
Mm-hmm. Then for my picks, I will go for week 4. I'm going to go with Plugi against Verdok. I think both not quite having the season so far that they like. Plugi is in 5th place, and with 6 points, it's not looking too bad. But only 58,000 points total score is not quite up there as high as he'd like, probably. And Verdok, obviously in last place so far, 51,000 total score is also the lowest of the division. So he'll really wish to turn that around and maybe pick up a couple more points here and there. He was more so towards kind of the beginning of Reddit League history. Let me actually check quickly. Yeah, he's been here since season 1 and made it to the playoffs back then. But ever since then, he's been more so someone who was kind of flip flopping between divisions 1 and 2. But in the last 1 or 2 seasons, I feel like, if I remember correctly, he's kind of made it back into sort of the midfield. And just this season hasn't really quite gone to his liking so far. And he'll want to put a stop to that streak of losses as quickly as possible. For week 5, I am gonna go with the game between Bastel and Barry. Interesting game. Barry so far with a pretty rough season as well. Obviously, the title winner from season 6, and then last season, I think, just barely missed out on the playoffs. So far, only 3 points. Also, not the greatest total score from him. So he also will want to turn that around really quickly. And Bastel, we've spoken about, fourth place currently, doing fairly well. After all, you only need to get top four to make it into the semifinals, and then anything can happen. So far, he's on course for that. Probably wants to keep that course up, and for that, I think a win against Barry would be quite nice for him. And then for week 6, I'm going to go with Pluki again and his matchup against Toto Radio, which is another one that I think is going to be very decisive for those semifinal spots. Toto currently in second, Pluki, as I said before, in fifth. Close still, the two of them. In the Philippines, I think that's going to be a very interesting matchup as well, and I'm looking forward to see who will come out on top of that one. And yeah, that does it for our first Reddit League show of the season. Thanks again, Carp, for joining me for this one.
Thanks for having me.
And I hope the people who watched enjoyed it. Let us know in the comments if you did. Let us know if you didn't. Actually, no, just don't. And yeah,
Let us know if you liked
it. Yeah, thank you all for watching. I hope you enjoyed, and I'll see you again next time. Till then, bye.
Goodbye.